Welcome to the Knowledge for Men show. Your life will never be the same.
Your level of success will seldom exceed your level of personal development.
I want to die empty of regret. I want to die empty of my best work. We don't understand who we are. Instead, we're living out somebody else's narrative.
What one man can do, another man can do. If it's been done, it can be done again.
Being yourself and being your truest, most authentic self in every moment. If it scares you or makes you a little afraid, do it. Follow your heart and your gut.
The first stage, I think, is finding you, like finding out who I am today.
Stuff will not work. You will have things that fail. Success is when you're a happy, fulfilled person. How do you define success?
It's your life, and you are the creator of the movie script that is your life story.
Attention, if you are a frustrated man who feels like he is not getting the results he wants in his life, health, wealth, relationships, and personal growth, then I've got a powerful free video training for you to help you become a strong, grounded man so you can unlock unlimited power in your life, business, and relationships. Go to kfmconfidence.com to get instant access to this training. Again, that's kfmconfidence.com. If you want a Cliff Notes version of the best material that I've learned after 300 interviews on this podcast about being a stronger, more powerful man, then it's all here at kfmconfidence.com. All right, guys, welcome to the show. I'm here with Krister Ungerboeck. He was the former CEO of a global tech company that grew 3,000%, had employees in 8 countries, and today now he is a CEO coach at CEOgrowth.com, where he helps CEOs and number 2 in commands step up and grow their businesses professionally and grow personally as well. Krister, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
All right. And Krister, we start off every show with a favorite success quote or some sort of saying that you've lived by that's helped you on your journey. So what do you got for us?
What got you here won't get you there. By Marshall Goldsmith.
And how's that relevant to your journey?
Somebody told me that when fairly early in my leadership career. And for me, it took it in the context of every time a company doubles in size, the leadership style of the CEO or even a department leader, anytime a department or a company doubles in size, the leadership style that got you there won't get you to the next time doubling. And I saw that personal experience going from 25 employees to 50 to 100 to 200 and beyond. Every single time, it almost required not reinventing myself, but in some cases, certainly going from 25 to 200, it really was kind of a reinvention if you would kind of take snapshots of my style at those 2 size companies.
And how did you learn that? Like, what were some of the challenges that you experienced where you realized that what got you here won't get you there?
I guess I was fortunate to have maybe a fairly high trust level with some of my key employees. So I had a couple different occasions with different individuals where they actually just told me to my face that one guy told me over a beer in Germany, he said, "You're a great manager, but you really are a terrible leader." And that was a bit of a wake-up call. It was about 10, 12 years ago. We were about 100.
Yeah. What do you think he meant by that? You're great there, but you're not a great leader.
So I think really where it comes down to is you can manage a company of about 25 people purely based upon your work ethic, drive, and kind of intellectual horsepower. But to get to 50 employees and beyond requires hiring a different caliber of individual as a second in command, and ultimately to go beyond 100 people, having a team of individuals that are smart or smarter than the CEO is. And leading those people don't like to be managed; they need to be led. And so I think that was a big part. Is you hear a lot of these quotes about hire great people and get out of their way. I had to get out of their way. And it kind of sounds trite when you see it on a LinkedIn post or some internet meme. But for somebody who has grown a company to 25 or 30 or 50 employees, a lot of it was based upon my hands-on style. So getting out of the way is a lot easier said than done.
Is there something there about like you built it, like you created this thing, and to have to change and adapt, it feels like, are you not in the picture? Like almost as if your ego is saying, like, I built this, like I'm going to get us even further, but you just keep hitting that brick wall and it's just not working.
I think that, getting over your own ego and my own desire or my own need, which was unconscious at the time, but my own need to be the smartest person in the room was probably one of the biggest things that took me that I had to get over. Because, you get to a certain place based upon your personal accomplishments and achievements, but in order to grow a company beyond a certain size, it can't be about you. You've got to bring on other people who have their own egos, and then you need to let them kind of take the forefront. So it really is, letting go and not having it about, I had that idea, I had the solution to that problem. Yeah. It was a huge part of really getting beyond, say, the 100 employee mark.
Wow. Okay. And once you've reached this level where you're starting to bring on people and you're letting go, wouldn't that just help you be more free as a leader? Wouldn't that just help? Because once you're letting go, that means it sounds like you're letting go of a lot of stress too.
I think, yes, that's part of it. I think there was a first step when I first started letting go, when I went through a couple false starts attempting to hire people who were kind of smarter than me, had more experience. Right. And because of the way I led them, they left because they didn't like being managed. They needed to be led. And then when I really first had some individuals who really could, by themselves could run a 50 or 100 person company, which if I want to grow a 200 person company, I need a couple people who can run a 50 or 100 person company so I can be working on the next phase of growth. So there was a little bit of an identity crisis for some number of months where I didn't have as much to do because I had these highly capable individuals that were doing things, and the stress was really low, and I had to almost find a new purpose that really wasn't about me being hands-on. It was about how do I affect and get people aligned and going in the right direction, hundreds of individuals, without me sitting in meetings with them and kind of telling them how to do it and how I have a better idea.
Right. Yeah. You have this quote here. You sent me some information before we got on the phone here. You showed me some research that people would rather fire their boss than get a raise, and that half of American workers say that they quit their job mainly because they're trying to escape a bad boss. Yeah,
that is. I think that research has been flowing. If you ask any HR person in a big company, they'll tell you that the old adage is people don't leave jobs, they leave bosses.
Wow.
And I had an experience about 10 years ago where I did a 360 survey and discovered that I was actually kind of an asshole to work for, and that was a very surprising revelation.
This is like a team survey where you're shooting out like what's the quality of leadership, and people are writing in, and that's how you found this out.
Yeah, so it was an anonymous survey that was sent out to about 30 people who had worked for me. It's called a 360 survey, and they gave feedback. And I was anxiously anticipating my results, thinking, I'm pretty good. There's going to be a couple small things that I can improve.
Right.
I was very much surprised, and interestingly enough, I've learned about a lot of the research since is that many people, the most toxic bosses are also the least aware of how toxic they are, because no one. I don't think anybody really gets up in the morning and says, you know what, I'm going to be mean to people today.
Right. Yeah.
But what happens is so often we get so caught up in our own egos that people just want to hear what we think and what our ideas are, and I was doing the same. And it's been certainly a journey since that moment to kind of make some major changes to my style. But it's also been a key to how we were able to kind of overcome that probably 75 to 100 employee barrier. If I hadn't been able to overcome that, we would have never had the growth beyond that point.
Now, do you think that some of these same issues, we'll go into them. You said one of them, like, stop trying to be the smartest person in the room as one of the key points here to being a better leader and letting go and empowering others to do what they're great at. Do you think that some of these same issues that are preventing a leader from being a great leader are some of the same issues that might come up in their relationships that are preventing them from growing in that relationship?
Yeah, And that was when the last 2 or 3 years, what I probably learned the most was I always felt that I was very different in my personal relationships and in my marriage than I was at work. And it wasn't until I got divorced that I realized that while my behaviors were different, the underlying motivations and the underlying kind of patterns from even childhood were actually having a negative impact on my relationship with my wife at the time. And it was not the same behavior. So it's not like I came and spoke to my wife or my kids the way I did employees. Right. But when I peeled back the onion and looked at the underlying needs and why I was doing some of the things, it was really the same underlying needs.
Yeah. And I think that should keep a lot of us engaged in this talk here. If some of us are like, hey, I'm not a CEO, do I need to be listening to this? But I think that there's the same thing underneath that would prevent us from being successful or as successful as we would like to be in our own relationships, which I know are, why so many people listen to this show. I'm curious for yourself, Krister, what would you say were some of those needs that you just discussed, some of those challenges that were showing up for yourself, personally and professionally that may have stemmed from your upbringing?
So I think there are two things, and if I can go into a little bit about how this 360 survey worked. Okay. It was done by this psychologist who'd been studying leadership at all levels, not just CEOs, but for like 60 or 70 years. He's in his 80s. Oh, okay. And when he was revealing the surveys there was an audience, about 100 executives in the room. And he was, you get a graph and it says, if your dot is here on this graph, then you were probably raised by parents who parented you in this way. They were, hypercritical, or they didn't give you a lot of positive feedback. And I was in the back. That's where my dot was. And it was also what people were saying about me. So the long and short of it was, we lead often how we were parented. And when you're thinking about how you want to show up as a father or a parent, you're passing that leadership style down to your kids. So it wasn't only that I was going and wanted to be a better leader. At the end of the day, what really surprised me is, being a better leader and overcoming these weaknesses is going to make me a better dad and a better husband at the end of the day. So one of the things is I had what was called the attacker personality, which is the attacker personality style. It's based upon a principle that a strength over practiced often becomes a weakness, right? So being direct and just telling people where they stand was something I was very good at. It got me to a certain level of success. And as many people do, we just keep doubling down on those things that got us to a certain level of success. And it started to become poisonous. And so the attacker it really came down to, it would probably be over the course of even a 12-month period, I was always leading with criticism and negative feedback and almost never giving positive feedback. Like maybe once a month would I possibly come up with a positive comment for someone on kind of what they did a good job and how they did it. And so you can imagine if you were parenting your children that way, it'd be like, probably child services would take your children away from you if you attempted to raise your children without giving them any positive feedback for months or years. So, but it was interesting more recently. Since I started doing coaching, I've started to actually think about why would that happen, right? So what I came to realize is that the reason many leaders don't give positive feedback nearly as frequently as negative feedback, and there's a fair amount of research to support this, is that if you imagine if you're a leader, and especially if you're a CEO or you're somebody who's been at the top of your game, just the fact that you're CEO or you've gotten promoted a couple of times, that's feedback in and of itself. So often what I found is I was wondering, I don't need positive feedback, so why do all these other people who work for me need it? Yeah. And the reality is that not everyone could say that they led a 3,000% growth company. Not everyone could say that they graduated from college, at age 20. Not everyone could say all these things where these external things were kind of the positive feedback. The reality is that a lot of employees in organizations, they weren't the A+ students. They weren't the star of the football team or whatever. They need that positive encouragement and reinforcement from their boss. So I think that was really kind of a major shift for me, is building a habit of encouraging and giving positive feedback to people, primarily employees, was a major change.
Wow. And I could see how that would directly relate over into a relationship. If you're leading with criticism and, hey, you didn't do this didn't happen, why are you doing this? Or I wish you didn't say that in front of whatever, instead of what you just shared, building a habit of encouraging positive feedback. I think that would absolutely help in whether it's your significant other or your parenting or even your siblings.
Yeah, I mean, that's like if you go to marriage counseling, I think one of the first things they do is they say, write down take a moment every single day and write 3 things that you're grateful for about your partner. And again, it's that building, that focusing on the positive rather than focusing on the negative. And if you take focusing on the negative, whether it's a work relationship or a marital relationship or a parent-child relationship, if you're constantly focusing on the negative, that will destroy your relationship over time, period.
And so what do we do now when the negative is there? So whether it's a spouse or whether it's an employee, there is something going on. And we, of course, want to build that habit of encouraging positive feedback. That's an absolute, just has to happen now. But what if there are negative things happening? Do we ignore the negative and continue with the positive and the negative just goes away? Do we address both? How do we do that?
So that's what, the easy thing to do for a leader is just to give negative feedback. And there are many other, so if negative feedback, if given effectively, can work as long as it's coupled with positive feedback. However, the research shows that if you can give positive feedback, people's behavior changes much more readily based upon positive feedback than negative. So the much more challenging thing to do is to catch someone doing something right. So we had an employee once he was a kind of a millennial, and he would work his 39 to 40 hours. And like many millennials, he was also asking after 6 months, when is he going to get promoted? And, I'm in my 40s, but I still come from that old school, you got to put in your time. And he was very intelligent. But we had multiple conversations with him directly about, hey, maybe consider not clocking out at 5:01 p.m. and put in a little bit more time, do some great work, and then you get promoted. That was pretty ineffective after 3 or 4 conversations. So we said, let's see if we can engineer a situation to catch him doing something right. So on a Thursday night, I worked out with his boss, said, I scheduled this meeting. It's Friday morning. I need something done. And we went to him about 3 o'clock on Thursday and said, hey, big project, need you to get it done by 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. It was basically, there was no way he could get it done, within the next 2 or 3 hours before work was done. He probably worked until midnight, did a great job, came in the next day. We were, I'll change names, but John, that was an incredible job. Thank you so much. The client thought it was great. And this was the turning point in his kind of work ethic issue. So again, we had to kind of think a lot harder. Giving positive or giving negative feedback is what I call lazy leadership. It took a lot more thinking of how can we create a situation where we can take an employee and catch them doing something right so that we can give them positive feedback in the hopes that would change their behavior. And in this particular case, it did.
Yeah, I can see that. So you identified, you started with kind of the negative, and then when you switched over to the positive, you're able to see the result that you were hoping to get.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What are some of these other things? Like you say, you're a recovering asshole boss.
I'm a recovering asshole boss. Yes, that is my.
Yeah. Okay. And so I think a lot of leaders or people who are in managerial positions, or maybe even if you're just in your relationship and people have called you in your relationship like a dick or an asshole. And, what are some practical things that you can share with some of the guys, just additional things, and, in addition to what you've been doing, such as, stop trying to be the smartest person in the room. I think there's a lot of ego in that of letting go. But what else do you have here?
Well, I think that part of it is really, so one is listening more. And I think it comes back to the ego and being the smartest person in the room. But yeah, I went to classes, multiple classes, where I was like trying to learn listening skills. And, you can read a blog post on the internet of the 5 steps to listening, but I still wasn't getting very good at it. And so at some point, and I actually had a CEO I was coaching came into me for this exact same problem. And he said, I want to improve his listening skills. I want to improve my listening skills. And I said, so do you need to learn the techniques to listen, or is the challenge that you don't have a desire to listen? And he stopped in his tracks and he said, I really don't want to listen. Well, if you think you're the smartest person in the room in a meeting and you think that your ideas are 10 times better than everyone else, how high is your desire going to be to listen?
Right.
So the ego, now the thing is, leaders get into a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So I don't listen. I talk more in the meetings. No one else gets to talk. So how am I going to get any proof that there are any other people in the room that have some good ideas if I'm not actually giving them an opportunity to share their ideas? Right. So you get into this kind of repeating cycle that kind of, goes down. So some of it is just encouraging people to share. Like I would go into a meeting, and if there were 5 people, I would just make sure every person got an opportunity to speak and just go around the room. Hey, what does everyone think about this? And once I started doing that, I started getting some data to prove to myself that actually other people in the room did have some good ideas. Other little things around listening is often I used to speak very, very quickly because I thought that made me sound smart. But the reality is that if you speak really, really quickly, I learned this when I went to live in France and Germany, and I didn't speak the language initially. And it becomes especially apparent if you don't speak someone else's language. If people speak really quickly, you don't catch every word. You just don't understand. So I can speak quickly for 2 minutes and take little to no breaths. And the reality is the listener may have really only understood 10% of what I said because they got lost in the first 15 to 20 seconds. So speaking more slowly, building in pauses every 15 to 30 seconds so people can interrupt, ask a question, and also kind of take some of the airtime. Some of those things were just kind of the tactical behaviors of improving listening and getting over this smartest person in the room thing.
Yeah. You have another point here. Don't assume your employees think like you. And I think that could go for don't assume your spouse thinks like you too.
Yeah, I think it's really gets into, there's a thing about how you ask questions that I've learned over the years is, many people would say, well, you need to let your employees, you need to ask the right questions, which I took as, well, I need to ask the correct questions to lead them to the answer that I want them to have. And that was pretty unsuccessful for me. I remember a couple times that people actually would interrupt me and say, clearly you have a solution in your mind. Why don't you just tell me the answer to the question already? Because I was asking leading questions.
Right.
So I think that, it's a simple thing, but not asking questions like they call them questions. So suggestions in the form of a question, like, have you considered doing this on Wednesdays instead of Mondays? You may as well say, why don't you do it on Wednesdays? That's not really a question. So asking questions that don't start with the word why or anything that's a yes, no question, shifting more to who, what, when, how kind of questions, and being where people can answer more open-ended.
Yeah. I think allowing them the opportunity to grow is, when you tell them what to do, it's like you stunt their growth.
Exactly. So telling people what to do was probably one of the most. I used to think that I need to tell people what to do because I don't have enough time to wait for them to figure it out on their own. And a leader told me once that often the shortest distance between point A and B is not a straight line. So I would think that if I have a 3-step thing that I need to give someone the steps to do, that the fastest way to get that conversation finished was by telling them the 3 steps, and then they would go off and do it.
Yeah.
And the reality is that if you have a really senior executive who's capable, somebody who's really, really smart, they rarely do what they're told anyway, unless it was their idea. So really asking them what they want to do is going to be actually faster to getting to the end result than telling someone what to do. Someone gave me an example of, you could go into a meeting and I could explain my perspective in the hopes that a person is going to know what to do after that 1 hour, or I could go in and possibly a more effective use of my time might be to have a 10-minute conversation and say, what are your next steps? What would you like to do? And why don't you come back to me? If people don't have the answer to that question, then say, come back tomorrow and tell me, what are your next steps? What would you like to do? Versus me telling them what the next steps are. And that was kind of a huge wake up call for me that, rather than spending an hour telling someone what to do, I could spend 5 or 10 minutes asking them a question and then having them come back and tell me what they want to do. And the likelihood that they'll do it is higher, and they'll understand it much more deeply than if I tell them.
I think from the leaders, or the guy who's giving the directions, that he's thinking, if I tell him, then we're going to save time. Well, let's get this done quick. Like, I'll just tell them what to do, versus you just asking the questions. They go off and try and do it, and then they come back and maybe it didn't get done as the leader would like it to get done.
Yeah.
And so you have a point here where, like, your staff has to want to follow you. Like, you're winning at the end of the day if your people are going home and they feel, and they're happy, they're engaged, they're proud of what they're doing. Like, that's the sign, you got good leadership in house. So what can leaders do to make it feel like their employees are going home winning? I think that the biggest thing comes back to positive encouragement and celebration. I think that we had initially, there was one point where we started, in many companies, you start tracking metrics, whether it's sales or service metrics. And sometimes people get a little bit frustrated about, why are you measuring, this particular activity? And there's kind of two schools of thought. Some managers or leaders will say, we want to, whether it's sales numbers, we want to stack rank everyone and put a Post-it on the wall so that everyone can see who's on the bottom of the list. What I found was, actually, if you want to change behavior and drive a strong culture, is you don't really need to publish anything more than the top 3 or 4 people on the list, because you're just saying, this is what we're measuring, this is what's important, and we're going to celebrate the people who are doing the job well. And so it's a kind of a trivial example, but I think everyone can imagine, like a call center, because we all, call tech support or whatever at some point. So, we had a call center and we would say, let's celebrate the number of calls closed. And we would celebrate every week who are the people that were the top 3 in terms of number of calls closed. But then we would also celebrate anytime somebody gets a personal best. So anybody could be a winner that week. But if you got a personal best of 50 calls closed this week, then you're not going to be celebrating again until you get 51. So what happens if you look at that over a period of time, not only is the team best going up because the top 3 people are a little bit competitive amongst each other, but even the people that aren't in the top 3 are just trying to say, hey, I want to do better than I did last week. And you can celebrate somebody who does their personal best for a week, for a month, for a quarter. You can celebrate that the team did the kind of the best ever over a week or a month. And that kind of celebrating success and keeping score, not keeping score with the intention of punishing the people who aren't getting a good score, but keeping score with the intention that you can't celebrate a high score unless you're actually keeping score. Right. Yeah. So just like, like your Fitbit and all, and anybody who's run marathons or is a runner is always kind of pushing themselves to get a little bit faster every single run. Right. Well, trying to take that same principle and applying it to performance in organizations is just a lot more fun way and a rewarding way for sending people home feeling fulfilled at the end of the day. Yeah. And you're elevating the whole team, not just the top 3 guys. And then the other people just give up because they just feel uninspired. They're not going to make it. Exactly. Yeah. Really good. Really good. And now just looking back at kind of this whole interview here and what we've done, like I feel that it really is about letting go and, taking a step back. And I think at the end of the day, like, isn't that what we want? Like when you first start a business, like to be able to take a step back and have other people lead the departments or lead the company that you created. I mean, isn't that like doesn't an entrepreneur create a business so that he can have freedom? And it's like we get attached to being the smartest person in the room, attached to, knowing it all and just, being all in the business and in everyone's, shoes. I feel like, listening to what you're sharing here today just takes it back to the core of, I think, why entrepreneurs and, people create businesses for freedom.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I would agree that all entrepreneurs. I think there is a category of entrepreneurs that create the business for their own freedom. But I think that a lot of entrepreneurs, once they get into it, then it often becomes more. It can often become a keeping up with the Jones. Like somebody else has a $10 million business. Right, I have a $20 million business. What about the guy who sold his business for $500 million? Yeah. So I think that's what the letting go part, what I think is even more powerful is once someone is able to get themselves into a situation where they can start to let go, whether that's a CEO or someone who's a middle manager in an organization. Right. You also it's one thing to intellectually know that I need to listen more, I need to give people more positive feedback than negative. But if you're stressed out and you're afraid or you're angry, then typically what happens is those negative emotions pull us back unconsciously to the negative behaviors of telling people what to do, giving them negative feedback. So it's kind of a virtuous cycle. The more I can let go and feel comfortable with that, then my people are getting better at what they're doing, but I need to make sure that I'm keeping my kind of fear and those negative emotions in check so I don't get pulled back into some of those toxic behaviors.
Yeah, that's good. And I want to get your opinion on this. When a leader decides to let go, do you have to accept that the performance just isn't going to be as good as what you could have done if you were to be all over that project? Is that an acceptance that a leader has to make?
I think it depends on the quality of people that you have. It's certainly an adjustment for a leader to manage high quality people well. But if you have really strong people, then I would say that the old adage that the job, the job's not going to be done well unless I do it myself, that really falls down. I mean, if you've got a company with 5 employees, you're probably right. Probably it is going to be you're going to do it better than anyone else. But once you get to 50, 100 employees, the reality is there's so many jobs that 2 things make a good job. 1, do you have enough time to do it? And 2, second, do you have the skills to do it effectively? So at some point, there's no way, no matter how much intelligence or skill someone has, if they don't have enough time to do the job well, then it doesn't really make a difference, right?
Yeah, you need support.
So I think that is certainly a challenge that other people are initially probably not going to do the job as well. But if you want to scale your business beyond a certain point, that's just a reality. People need to try 3 or 4 times and they need to develop the skills that the leader had. I think it also comes back again to this ego, right? So you say, I can do the job better. And sometimes we use that as an excuse to be like, well, I am better than that person because I can do that job better. And the reality is that person probably hasn't done the job 100 times or the task 100 times. And if we look back on ourselves and say, well, the first time I did that task, how did I do? Probably not very well. So it's not that I'm necessarily better than that individual. They're just less experienced at doing it. Assuming they're a good worker and they're intelligent and things like that, which, if you're not hiring strong employees, then that's a separate issue.
Yeah. Got it. I feel that maybe entry level or maybe CEOs who've been in the game for a few years, or maybe even 5 years or so, get fixated on what they earn. So a certain revenue or net amount that they're bringing in every single month, right? And so in order for them to get out or to grow, they might need to hire some great talent, and that's not going to be cheap. And so I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on like a CEO for the first time? He's going to make some really, some 6-figure or high earners type of hires for the first time. And he's going to have to let go, he or she's going to have to let go of that amount that they're used to earning. So they're going to have to go down in profit for a couple months or so, with the risk, taking the gamble on hiring some really good talent. for the first time.
Yeah. I actually had that. I had a situation where in 2007, we had a business unit in Germany, and because of some things that happened, I had to actually put my whole life on hold and kind of move back to Germany to fix this. And what I realized at that time, and when I came back, I said, I'm not going to do this again. And I would rather take less money personally, but have a team of individuals that I can truly rely on that are going to be there for the long term. So in my case, frankly, as when I was CEO, I wasn't anywhere near the top highest paid person in the company. That was by choice. On my choice is that I would rather than working 80 hours a week and feeling like the world was on my shoulders and being stressed and afraid all the time, it was better to have a couple of really strong individuals who I trusted could do really complex tasks and work so that it didn't end up. And for the first time after hiring some of those individuals, I would go on vacation and, of course I would check email, but there was nothing that I absolutely had to go, and be on a phone call. It was pretty rare that I would get interrupted in those kinds of ways.
Okay, continue on if you're gonna hit the point here.
I think that was, it was. Yeah, that was
all right. What happened now to your was it instant? It sounds like was it instantly successful, or did you have to lose or not make money for a couple months, or have to settle with less amount of money for a couple months before it would start growing again, and the talent that you brought in would start paying off?
Well, I mean, certainly if we hadn't had that talent, we wouldn't have been able to double the company again. So regardless of what I decided to pay myself or didn't, the value of the company went up by millions of dollars based upon those hires. I always came from the perspective that if I want to run a 100-person company and grow that to a 200-person company, then I'm going to need to have at least one, if not two leaders that can manage the 100-person company so that I can go build the next 100 part. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, it was kind of like, let me get this to this stage, and then I'm going to hire a team of individuals or maybe one individual to manage that business unit. And then we're going to continue growing by adding on kind of a new thing. So it was a means to an end.
Right. And you're thinking long term too. It didn't matter in that moment, but it allowed you to double your company or, in the future. And that's what mattered.
Yeah.
Got it. All right, great. Let's now dive into the knowledge round. I just want to ask you a few last kind of questions here. And so, Chris, are you ready for the knowledge round?
I am ready.
Have you ever felt like you weren't the strong, grounded man that you know you're capable of becoming? Like there's something more inside of you, but you don't know how to get it out? Me too. Years ago, I was broke, sleeping on my brother's couch, and just got out of a serious breakup that left me on the floor for months. Now, I have a multiple six-figure business. I'm in the best shape of my life, have an abundant dating life, and live on the beach here in San Diego. I want you to break through too and create the life that you want. And because people kept asking me so many questions, I've created this free video training series on becoming a strong, grounded man so that you can have more freedom, love, and connection in your life. I'll also teach you how to build real backbone to boost your masculinity as a man so that you can have more respect, power, and confidence personally and professionally. Simply go to kfmconfidence.com to get this training. Again, that's kfmconfidence.com. Also, I share the #1 conversation that your father never had with you about women. That will be a major wake-up call for 90% of you and will improve the quality of your relationships forever. Go to kfmconfidence.com to get this free training today. Welcome to the Knowledge Round, where the guests will be asked rapid-fire questions to give the audience invaluable pieces of wisdom to help transform their lives. Starting in 3, 2, 1, showtime.
My first question for you, what advice would you give to someone who's feeling kind of lost or unsure of their purpose? Like they're really just not sure where to dedicate their time. They could be in the wrong job. They could be doing the wrong business. They just feel pretty lost to where they're at.
For me, I read the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and I wrote my personal mission statement. I was fortunate to do that when I was 19 years old. And it's like the first habit, or the first and second habit of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Get clarity on what you want to be, not in terms of a job, but the intrinsic traits and qualities that you want to be used to describe yourself at your funeral. I think one of the exercises is write your own eulogy. How do you want people to describe you? And for me, it was I wanted people to describe myself as somebody who teaches and helped inspire people to do new things. And then I said, okay, well, what kind of career would I potentially do in order to live out that vision?
Yeah. Great. Yeah. And I think that's something that you don't just do casually, like, oh, real quick, I'm going to knock this out. It's a serious project. I think there's so much to be learned from what would be said at that eulogy. How would you want to be remembered? I think it's very personal.
Yeah. In my case, I try to take a couple of days each year. I think the first time that you do it, it's really worth 3 to 4 days to kind of go someplace where you're in some degree of solitude and you can really think and diary and kind of write it and really understand where you want to go, and then revisiting it once per year.
Yeah, I think that's critical, revisiting that so you don't get off course and you can recheck and realign. Now, Krister, what do you think is holding most men back from becoming stronger, grounded men today?
I think it's the combination of ego and wanting to be right. If we feel like we have to be this strong, to be a man, we're supposed to be right, and often being vulnerable or expressing our emotions is maybe not considered manly in some contexts.
Right.
And I think that's probably not helping us.
Yeah. Yeah, there's that saying where you can either be right or you can be happy. What have been 3 of your most influential books that have helped you on your journey, and briefly why?
I'd say one was The Gifts of Imperfection by Brené Brown. I think that was developing my own style for connecting with others and being more vulnerable and being a softer individual, albeit with kind of the tougher side that I already had down pat, which we've already talked about.
Yeah.
Second,
you could even say more human side too, rather than softer. Yeah. As it's just being human and sharing what's real.
Yeah, and empathy in general, humanistic empathy. Yeah. The combination.
Yeah. What else? This is a great book, though.
So from a pure management perspective, I always felt that High Output Management by Andy Grove, the CEO of Intel, that was probably one of the best management books that I ever read in terms of how to be a CEO and how to be a leader.
All right. Great. And one more?
So the third one, I was thinking, how could I surprise you? One is you can't even find it on Amazon.
All right.
Have you ever heard of the Manly Separation Survival Guide?
No, I haven't. Tell us about it.
So I read this when I was going through my separation, and so I would summarize it. So any of your listeners who are kind of having trouble in their marriage or whatever, or even in separation, it was he probably should change the title to Get Your Wife Back, Get Your Life Back. So it was really about being a better man, and if you are having marriage troubles, then focus on being a better man, the kind of man that someone would want to be married to. And your best chances of getting your wife back are just being a better husband. And she may or may not come back, but at least if she doesn't, you can walk away with your head held high and say, you know what, I'm the better man and she's the one that's losing out.
Either way, you're walking out and you're a better man.
Exactly.
Yeah. Powerful. Great. And now this next question is more of a scenario for you, Krister. Imagine you had 60 seconds with 25-year-old Krister. If you can imagine where he, was at personally, professionally, financially, and knowing what you now know today, what would you tell him to do? What would you tell him not to do?
Well, you just said it a little bit earlier that I would tell myself that being right doesn't mean that you're going to be happy, and often quite the opposite. So to focus on being happy rather than focus on being right all the time. Another thing is, I think it was David Data in one of his books, The Way of the Superior Man, said, live like your father is dead. I think a lot of us go through life wanting to please our fathers or please our parents or please other people. And whether it's the career we choose or the degree of success that we've decided is the level of success that we want to have, not living our lives for other people. And then the third thing I would tell myself is that you will have multiple soulmates in your life. I think that there were a couple relationships in my life that I got into, and I got into primarily out of fear that I had met someone who I thought was so amazing at the time that I thought I would never, ever find someone who was nearly as amazing as that individual. So I went into that relationship and held on to it out of fear that I would never find anything better. And, 20 years later, there are definitely multiple equally exciting women that I've met in my life, and happy to have that perspective.
Going in with that, this is the best. This is like, I found it. This is all there is. Like holding on to it like it's Golem in his ring, like chasing it. Having that, like willing to do whatever it takes. And it comes across off as perhaps not the most attractive in the long run.
Yeah. I must say I'm having much more fun dating, just kind of going into it thinking, you know what, if it doesn't work out, there's going to be another person around the corner that may work out. And it's so much more, it's just enjoyable to meet people, and maybe they're not a good fit, but I don't need to judge them, and I don't need to worry about whether they're judging me, and see where it goes.
Yeah, I like it. What would you say is your philosophy on life and success?
I feel like it's changed a lot over the last couple of years. I went from somebody who works 60 to 80 hours a week consistently for 20 years to somebody who's now kind of completely flipped my life upside down and really focus a lot on my kids and getting out in nature a lot. So stop and smell the roses, be self-aware. I've always been a very self-aware person, so I knew what I was good at and what I wasn't good at. More recently, what I've really been working on is not just developing my self-awareness, but what some psychologists call other awareness, which is really how other people perceive me. Yeah. I don't know if that was a good answer or not, but
well, you know what? I think it was authentic. That's what it was. You didn't have you didn't have this canned response like waiting for that question. I'm wondering, what was life like for you when you were working the 60-80 and you were the you've said it yourself, the asshole CEO, compared to where you are now, where you said you're spending more time with the kids, getting out in nature. If we were to like draw, compare and contrast here, what was it like?
I've never had people come up to me, other than since I changed, kind of turned my life upside down. Never had people come up to me and say, "You look so happy." Until, and in fact, quite the opposite. I would meet people who, I met a guy once, it was about 10 years after the fact, where I was working with him on a daily basis. And 10 years later, we were kind of drunk at a bar really late. And he goes, "Yeah, back in 98, we thought you might be like on crack cocaine or something. You were like working like," it was, so definitely don't have, and I wasn't on crack cocaine or any drugs at the time. It was just Red Bull.
Oh, okay.
So, it was, I think that I feel more relaxed, and people seem to be telling me that, and since none of those people report to me, I can only assume that it's true. So.
Yeah. They're not reporting. Talk about, I'm curious about the money, and you don't have to give numbers here, but I'm assuming just because you're working 68 hours a week drinking Red Bulls that you had some good income earnings there. If that has mattered, if like what you're doing now is more fulfilling, or just talking about going in that direction.
I don't know. Money has really just never been something that I look at. I guess I was fortunate that, when I graduated from college, I had like the highest paying job of anybody in my graduating class. So I guess, and I always just kind of felt that if I'm doing something that I'm passionate about and I'm working hard at it, then money will just kind of, it will be there. Right. So, I don't know. I've just never been like, when it comes to finances, never been a keeping up with the Jones kind of person. I've got plenty other friends that are CEOs of even smaller companies who made multiple times what I made when I was CEO. And it's just never really bothered me. I think I have enough. I have enough for me. And There are certainly a lot of people that have more, but I joined an organization called Young Presidents Organization about 6 or 7 years ago, and somebody said to me, it was the best thing he said to me. He said, you know what? In this organization, there's always going to be somebody who's got a bigger company, a bigger plane, a bigger car, a bigger whatever. You just don't try to get on the rat race with that, which spoke to me because I was already that way. Yeah. I mean,
it sounds like, you know, a lot of, or for even myself, but I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, why they become entrepreneurs is because they're trying to escape the corporate rat race. But what I have found is that there is also equally an entrepreneur rat race, which is,
there is. Yeah.
It's like, how many employees, how big's your office? Like, oh, do you provide meals, or like, just like there's a rat race being an entrepreneur too. Like, I don't think it's necessarily the vehicle. I think there's a rat race in all vehicles, but it's your mind. It's how are you going to live your life, and are you going to follow what other people are doing around you? Or as in, you know, Mark Manson, if he has this book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, and it's a New York Times bestseller, great book, but really just like, okay, what do I care about? And am I going to live what I care about, or am I going to live my life through other people, which I think is suffering. I think that's suffering.
I read Mark's book a couple months ago, and a lot of that resonated with me. I think that at least on the financial front, I was always a CEO. I was measuring like my keeping up with when I was 19 years old, in that mission statement that I wrote, I said that I wanted to build $1 billion company in my lifetime. And I kind of let that goal run me. And in the end, it was a hard thing to walk away from something that for over 20 years of my life, I had kind of defined myself by, I'm going to be the guy who builds $1 billion company. But at the same time, I wasn't getting anything positive out of that goal, and the $1 billion company is not going to love me back. So
right. Like, you wanted to be on Forbes and stuff like that.
That was my it was about the ego, the recognition, the significance. That was a big part of it. And I think that growing up, I grew up in a family business, and I think people often who work in family businesses, I was joking, I was getting my MBA, and they walked around, they went around the group, and everyone was supposed to introduce themselves with one thing, and there are all these really high-powered executives there, and I introduced myself as, I have founder's son syndrome. I want to basically make a big enough impact on the world that people will never look at me and say, you know what, he just did it because his daddy gave him something. So I think there are a fair number of people in family businesses that kind of have that need to prove themselves.
Wow, powerful talk here. What's exciting you now? Like, what's getting you out of bed today?
You know, I ever since starting the CEO coaching, I work with a really small number of CEOs, often in tech, just because I ran a software company. I was a programmer when I was young. So I really enjoy just the look on a CEO's face when, you know, that one tip or that realization that he or she realizes that they're that part of their own leadership style is actually what's holding them back. It's fortunate that I don't have to work full time to kind of meet my own financial objectives today. I get to work with people that I really enjoy working with, who I think are passionate about growing themselves, and then I help them to grow their businesses. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm also in the early stages of working on a book. So
yeah, I was going to ask.
Yeah. So
there's a nice journey in there. What is the title? Is asshole in there?
No, you know, I what I want the book to be about is somewhere the combination of how being a great leader also makes us a great dad and a great husband at the end of the day.
Oh, great.
And that's kind of like, I think that in coaching, it's the business side to help somebody to figure out how to double the size of their business is kind of, as long as somebody's got a good business and they're reasonably smart, I think it's kind of easy. What I really like is the people who have good businesses that can be doubled in size every 3 to 4 years or faster, but then they also have this insatiable desire to learn and become a better leader, dad, and husband. Those are the people that I really like to work with.
That's great. That's great. And for all those listening, you can follow up with Krister and see the work. He's got a ton of great content on his website at ceogrowth.com, ceogrowth.com. Do you have a launch date on the book that you're working on?
I'd say it's going to be 12 months from now. I have to hone my.
Yeah.
I first have to hone exactly what I want it to be about. And then 6 months after that date, then I'm sure we'll have it in production.
All right. Great. Krister, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your lessons here with my community.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Knowledge for Men podcast. Hundreds of interviews and millions of downloads later, we're continuing to build an international movement, and we're just getting started. So if you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and leave a helpful review in iTunes, because it really helps the podcast grow so we can impact even more men in the world who need this. Guys, this is all about living with purpose, where every day you only do things that matter to you. You wake up, live with purpose, and take massive action towards the life you want. And always remember, love the life you have while creating the life of your dreams. Go to kfmfree.com to get a surprise bonus I've made for my listeners. Again, that's kfmfree.com for something that's changed my life, and I'm offering it to you for free. Also, check out my Amazon best-selling books that I've written for you to help you crush life at kfmauthor.com. Again, that's kfmauthor.com to see all the books I've created to help you break through in life. This is your host, Andrew Farabee, founder of knowledgeformen.com, and I'll see you in the next episode.